humanity is running out of room. For thousands of years, civilization expanded across continents, oceans, and borders. Every great power in history was built by controlling territory, resources, and infrastructure. But now, for the first time in human existence, the next frontier may not be another country, another island, or another continent. It may be space itself. Right now, space stations are small, temporary, and fragile. They are scientific laboratories floating hundreds of kilometers above Earth, dependent on constant supply missions to survive. But over the next few decades, these stations will transform into something completely different. Entire orbital nations will begin to emerge above the planet, and the first country to truly dominate low Earth orbit may gain an advantage. So powerful that it could shape the future of humanity itself, because space is no longer just about exploration. It is becoming infrastructure. In the 20th century, global powers competed for oil, oceans, trade routes, and industrial dominance. In the 21st century, that competition is beginning to move upward. Whoever controls orbital infrastructure may eventually control communication systems, navigation networks, manufacturing, transportation, surveillance, and even the movement of human civilization beyond Earth. That future may sound impossible today, but people once said the same thing about airplanes, about skyscrapers.com, about the internet, and about walking on the moon. The truth is that the technology required to build orbital civilizations is already beginning to appear around us. Reusable rockets are dramatically reducing the cost of reaching space. What once required enormous government, programs can now be accomplished by private companies, launching rockets almost every week. A single launch that once cost billions of dollars may eventually cost only the tiny fraction of that amount. And that changes everything. Because the moment access to space becomes affordable, construction in orbit becomes economically possible. Artificial intelligence is also accelerating this transformation. Autonomous robots are already capable of performing complex manufacturing and repair tasks. In the future, fleets of robotic systems may assemble enormous structures in orbit without requiring constant human supervision. At the same time, private companies are now developing commercial space stations, faster than many governments expected. Some of these stations are designed for scientific research. Others are being planned as orbital factories. Some may even become luxury hotels for the ultra-wealthy. But eventually, these stations will stop serving only temporary visitors. Permanent populations will begin appearing in orbit. At first, only a few dozen people may live there continuously. Scientists, engineers, technicians, and construction crews. But over time, those small populations will grow larger and more permanent. Schools will appear, medical facilities, restaurants, gyms, entertainment centers, businesses, entire local economies floating silently above the Earth. And once thousands of people begin living in orbit permanently, something strange will begin to happen. These stations will stop behaving like stations and start behaving like countries.com. Because when humans settle somewhere permanently, they naturally build systems of identity, law, and governance. The people living in orbit will eventually require security systems, emergency services, trade agreements, leadership structures, and resource management. They will need rules for transportation, housing, labor, communication, and even conflict resolution. And eventually, they may begin demanding political independence, because people who spend their entire lives living above Earth may no longer see themselves as citizens of countries below it. They may begin seeing themselves as citizens of orbit itself. This has happened many times throughout history. Small settlements, once dependent on distant governments, slowly transformed into powerful, independent nations. The same process may soon repeat itself in space. And once orbital civilizations become economically valuable, global competition will intensify dramatically. The United States is already investing heavily into long-term orbital infrastructure. China is building its own independent space stations and future orbital systems. Private aerospace companies are designing habitats capable of supporting hundreds of people for extended durations, and the first trillion-dollar economy in space may emerge far sooner than most people realize. Factories operating in microgravity could manufacture advanced materials impossible to produce on Earth. Pharmaceuticals, semiconductors, fiber optics, and experimental alloys may all become significantly more valuable when produced in orbit. Massive solar power stations could eventually collect uninterrupted energy in space and beam electricity directly back to Earth. Asteroid mining companies are already planning missions to extract rare metals and industrial resources worth unimaginable amounts of money. .com and orbital shipyards may one day construct gigantic interplanetary spacecraft far too large to ever launch from Earth's surface. This is why low Earth's orbit is becoming one of the most strategically important regions in human history, because whoever controls the infrastructure above Earth may eventually influence the global economy below it. But orbital nations may also possess one enormous advantage over civilizations on Earth. They can continue expanding almost without limit. New habitats can always be added. New districts can always be constructed. New industries can always emerge. Entire orbital cities may slowly grow into gigantic rotating civilizations containing parks, transportation systems, residential neighborhoods, and artificial environments designed to simulate life on Earth. At first, living in orbit will be dangerous and expensive, but eventually it may become normal. Children born in space may one day grow up never experiencing Earth's gravity naturally. Entire generations could emerge whose lives, identities, and cultures are fundamentally shaped by living beyond Earth. And those future citizens may eventually see Earth the same way modern people view distant ancestral homelands. Important, beautiful, but no longer home. That moment would fundamentally transform human civilization forever, because humanity would no longer be a species confined to one world. We would become something entirely new. A civilization spread across multiple environments. A species capable of building societies in the darkness of space itself. And the first true space nations may not begin with giant futuristic cities. They may begin with simple stations quietly orbiting above us right now. Small outposts. Tiny populations. Fragile systems. But every civilization in history began that way. The greatest cities on Earth once started as isolated settlements surrounded by uncertainty, and one day, future generations may look back at humanity's first orbital stations the same way we look back at the first ancient cities on Earth, not as experiments, not as temporary structures, but as the beginning of a completely new chapter in human history, because these stations were never just laboratories floating in space. They were the first countries of humanity's future beyond Earth.